So there is a screenshot of me that's been going around that I need to address. This screenshot was taken from my 2023 Australian Grand Prix recap video, and the controversy surrounding it does not have to do with the fact that I look like I just farted while giving a timeshare presentation. No, it has to do with what producer Jeff here had up on screen next to me for 3 seconds, where it makes it look like I'm saying that I agree with the stewards regarding their absolutely awful decision to give Carlos Sainz what I believe is the worst penalty in Formula One history. 3 seconds later, producer Jeff here changed the text to say #justice for Sainz like he should have done originally, but by that time, the damage had already been done and my reputation had already been tarnished forever, you jerk. Before I get into explaining why this is the worst penalty in Formula One history, do you have anything to say for yourself, producer Jeff, you jerk?
Editing is hard.
Cool. So anyways, here's a reminder of what led to Carlos Sainz's penalty. Producer Jeff, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions that you think the viewers would also have, you jerk. Carlos Sainz started the race P5, dropped down to P11 after his first pit stop, and then made his way back through the field to where he was P4 on the grid when the second red flag was waved. This meant that he would be restarting the race in P4 with just 2 laps remaining. On the first lap of this restart, Sainz collided with Fernando Alonso, and while both of them remained in the race, a red flag was waved because of 2 separate crashes between Logan Sargeant and Nick de Vries, and between Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Now here's what's wild about that. None of those 4 drivers, Logan Sargeant, Nick de Vries, Pierre Gasly, and Esteban Ocon, got a penalty, as their incidents were deemed to be first lap racing incidents. And additionally, neither Lance Stroll nor Charles Leclerc were penalized on the actual first lap of the race for their collision that led to Leclerc DNFing, which was also deemed a first lap racing incident. But the stewards were not only not as kind to Carlos Sainz, they dropped Thor's hammer down on him. The stewards handed Sainz a 5-second time penalty, and this was their reasoning. Quote, the stewards reviewed positioning/marshalling system data, video, timing, telemetry, team radio, and in-car video evidence, and determined that on the first corner of the restart, a collision occurred between car 55, Carlos Sainz, and car 14, Fernando Alonso. We determined that car 55 was wholly to blame for the collision. Car 14 was significantly ahead of car 55 at the first corner, and nevertheless, car 55 drove into car 14, causing it to spin and leave the track. We accordingly imposed a 5-second penalty on car 55. Personally, I don't feel strongly either way about whether or not Sainz deserved to get a penalty of some sort for causing this collision. I do think that it was definitely a more egregious collision than all the other first lap racing incidents I already mentioned, as Sainz clearly took too much speed into that corner. Honestly, if I had to pick, I'm probably leaning towards Sainz deserving a penalty of some sort for what he did. What do you think, producer Jeff, you jerk?
Well, the stewards were there in Australia, and you weren't. You were at least a 15-hour commercial flight away. So I agree with the stewards.
Okay. But the issue is not that he got a penalty. It's that the penalty that he did get was far and away the worst penalty I have ever seen given in Formula One. Sainz was handed a 5-second time penalty, which is the penalty a driver would normally get for what he did. But this was not a normal situation, as the race was about to end behind a safety car because there were too few laps remaining to continue racing. When cars are behind a safety car, they're allowed to bunch up all together, so the time gap between them is essentially completely eliminated, making a time penalty an absolutely insane penalty to give Carlos Sainz here. Sainz finished the race P4 behind the safety car, but because the cars were all bunched up, this 5-second penalty dropped Carlos Sainz out of the points down to P12, which was literally last place of all race finishers. Now, I did a little extra digging, and this stat should make you as angry about all this as I am. The gap between P4 and P12 at the Bahrain Grand Prix was 50 seconds, and at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was 45 seconds. So Sainz's 5-second penalty was more like 9 or 10 5-second penalties, which is so unbelievably unfair that it is not even funny, and that is why Carlos Sainz was understandably crying at the end of the race and is still extremely upset, as he should be. Producer Jeff, you still stand with the stewards here? You think that they made the right call giving him a 5-second time penalty?
Yes.
How much are they paying you?
Not enough to where I don't have to work with you.
Jerk. To make matters even worse, Fernando Alonso, who Sainz got the penalty for hitting, did not even have his race impacted at all by this entire ordeal, as he still went on to finish P3 because of how Formula One's order classification system works. To reiterate what I said in my Australian Grand Prix recap video, if a red flag is waved on the first lap of a start or restart before the cars make it through the circuit's first sector, the race will be restarted using the most recent official classification, which would be the grid order used at the previous start or restart. So Sainz was effectively penalized for an action that had no negative consequence. Side note, or should I say Sainz note, a lot of people are saying that Sainz got a penalty on a lap that didn't even exist. And I don't really like that phrasing because despite the lap not resulting in any classification change, it still knocked 4 drivers out of the race, so it definitely existed. And that, folks, is how Carlos Sainz was just handed the worst penalty of all time in Formula One. Thoughts, producer Jeff? You jerk? Making me look like I support all that?
So you're saying that you do not agree with the stewards?
No, I don't. I don't necessarily disagree with them that, when they gave Sainz the penalty, but it's the fact that the penalty they gave him made absolutely no sense. It was like, oh, this is what we usually give. It's a 5-second penalty. Look at all the precedent for this. It's like, yeah, well, those races didn't end up behind a safety car at the end where all the cars are bunched together, so a 5-second penalty is a 50-second penalty. It's crazy. They give him a 50-second penalty.
But maybe they would have given the penalties in the other races even if there was a safety car.
That doesn't change the fact that it makes no sense and is terrible.
I was half right, though.
The point is to drop them back 5 seconds of track time, not 5 seconds of world time. It's 5 seconds on track, not just 5 seconds on the clock. There's a difference.
I think I was half right. So can you give me a half J-bone?
J-bone! Oh yeah, and by the way, if you enjoyed this video, it is actually a clip from this week's full Australian Grand Prix debrief video available only on patreon.com/formulabone. Along with the public Grand Prix previews and recaps you know and hopefully love, I also do longer and more conversational post-race debriefs with producer Jeff here on patreon.com/formulabone, where I also write a weekly column available only to Formula Bone patrons that gets sent directly to your email inbox every single week, and there's plenty more perks there as well, and you can get all of that for just $5 a month. Your direct support on Patreon comes with a ton of perks and also goes a long way to making it so that I can keep making Formula One content full time. So if you would consider joining today, I'd really appreciate it. So if you want the rest of this here video, go to patreon.com/formulabone now. Shout out to all my $10 and up patrons who get their names displayed on screen, like so. And an extra special shout out to my $30 and up patrons who get their name said like I say J-Bone. Colky! @RatedBookie! Glow! See you on the Patreon. J-Bone! And Jeff. J-Bone!